you're just like, okay, yeah, now I have 3 years worth of work that I've got to get done in 1 year. If you don't step up and say something about it, then they're just going to say, okay, Neil can handle this. Maybe 6 months into it, we give Neil another project, because now all he's got 6 years or 6 months of a project done. He can handle another project, kind of thing. And, we just let that, go on and on and on and on and on. And if that's the incentive, is just that they rely on you, which, tends to be the case in a lot of, it's just, you want to make yourself so indispensable that you'll take all of this responsibility on and you'll push yourself to do all of this work and everything. That's really it. That's what your reward is, regardless of what they're paying you. It's just that they're just going to work you more. That's the reward, is they're going to work you more.
Welcome to the Archispeak Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. Each episode, Neil Pan, Cormac Phelan, and I have a casual conversation about all things architecture, and we invite you to listen in as we talk about everything in the profession, both the good and the bad. Maybe you're considering a career in architecture, you're still in school, or you've been around the blocks of Corbusier's City of Tomorrow more times than you'd like to admit. Join us in the studio as we stand around the water cooler and talk about why we love our chosen profession. It's time for some Archispeak.
I died in South Africa, only outlined my body in Tiffany blue. When I died, I drove riding and swam with the dolphins and Lisa Frank and you.
Welcome to episode 28 of the Archispeak Podcast. I'm Neil Pan.
I'm Evan Troxel.
And I'm Cormac Phelan.
And this week, we have a very special friend of the show, Jonathan Pickup. And for those of you that do not know Jonathan, he is officially now our second New Zealand friend of the show, but he is also the guru when it comes to Vectorworks and Vectorworks tutorials. So highly recommend anyone who uses that program to go check out his site. We'll have a link actually in the show notes to his site. So thank you, Jonathan, for supporting the show.
Thanks, Jonathan. We appreciate it.
Very much so.
Hey, where do you find the show notes?
You can subscribe to the show notes by visiting archispeakpodcast.com and subscribe to the show notes.
And you can also find them on the page that this episode is posted on, which is going to be archispeakpodcast.com/episodes/28. And that has all the links to the things that we talk about during the show. So check it out. All right, we're talking about how sympathetic Cormac is to his team members, his consultants, his clients.
But we were talking about no sympathy.
Oh, no sympathy. That's right. So you've been working a little bit lately, Cormac, huh?
Yeah, I've been doing a little extra overtime. Trying to just get
extra overtime. What's that?
Extra overtime. There's like your... okay, yeah, I've worked a few hours extra this day or that day, and then you say, I can't believe I've really worked that long. I can't remember the last time I slept. That's extra overtime.
That's extra OT.
Exactly.
And you're getting paid for that, right?
Oh, yeah, don't you?
In the world of architecture?
Yeah. No.
Oh, you're a salaried employee.
I'm a salary man, which means that it doesn't matter how many hours I put in. I still get paid the same.
I was talking about this with my wife lately, and they always refer to us as exempt employees, those who are salary. And I said, I don't even know what that means. And she goes, well, it means you're exempt from the labor laws.
That's great. Oh, crap. That hurts.
So that's what that means.
That's what it means.
Nice. I didn't realize
Exempt
that.
employees.
Yes, there's exempt and non-exempt. And if you are exempt...
That is awesome.
I've always heard that term. But
I've never heard that term, but...
You've never heard that term?
No.
Okay.
It's not that I'm not going to use it from here on out, but honestly, I've never heard that term.
Yeah, it's... I don't know, maybe it's more of a California
It's probably
term.
because I've always been an exempt employee.
That's right. Yeah, it's just like what you were in school. You do what it takes.
Yeah.
Well, the first firm I was, I don't know, not the first firm, but the firm I worked at soon after college, for almost 8 years. They basically, when you were hired, you were an exempt employee. They called you that, and I never really. I mean, I guess I knew what it meant. I didn't get paid for overtime, but I didn't realize that. I guess I've just never thought about it, that exempt meant exempt from labor laws. So,
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice.
Well, I know that when I got hired on, I was hourly, and then later on I was made salary, and it was sold as an exciting thing because you had a lot of potential for bonus when you did that. When you were hourly, you didn't. If you got you could still possibly get a bonus, but it wasn't anywhere near what you could if you were salaried, because supposedly salaried employees get to, you're still tracking the time that you're putting towards the projects, right, Cormac?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you at the end of the year, they could pull up those records and see what the effort was and what the results were of the projects you were working on, and then they could make a I don't know. They just decide on how much of a bonus you were going to get based on whatever potential was out there for your salary range or for your position in the firm or whatever it was. And then the economy hit, right?
Yes.
And then nobody got any bonuses and nobody got any merit increases, and you didn't even get a cost of living increase. So it was actually like you're getting a pay reduction every year.
Yeah.
But yet you're still expected to work, and yet you're still an exempt employee.
And you're still an exempt employee, and you still work extra overtime.
Extra OT. That's right.
Now you're just depressing me.
So what kind of sympathy do you have or not?
Oh, I think it's all been a bunch of no sympathy for me. Really. We've just... Without going too much into it, because we don't really like to talk specific.
Give people a taste of what it's really like to work in the field of architecture.
If you,
that's what we do here.
Deadlines never move. Deadlines. Unless you can negotiate deadlines. But say you're under construction. Those never move. Especially, in the field that we, or with the client base that you and I, tend to work with school boards. That schools have to open on time. Things have to get done. So, if you're at a particularly rough time of a project, say a historic project that has a lot of unforeseen conditions that are, make what you thought, the assumptions that you made during your design process and construction documentation process, and there it's nowhere near them, and you got to work a little bit extra time, so be it. No sympathy. And it's interesting because can actually that example that I gave kind of tends to, in my case, we're not in my case, but in my team's case and stuff, whereas and I was talking about this with some older seasoned architects, some of that, and it's like, well, what was it like when you came out of school? I mean, what did you try to do when you were first hired? I mean, when I was there, I was trying to impress them, to show them, how hard I could work, and how I could just basically kind of crank it out and be there and do whatever they need. I'm there for you. I'm your man. I'm going to be an invaluable part of this team. And, I remember my very first day, right after graduation, my very first day at work, I was there till about 2:30 at night. Now, the bosses were there too, because they were they were given they were shortlisted for a project, but they basically had a really quick turnaround to get a proposal done. So it was all hands on deck, and everybody stayed It was an office of 7 people, and all 7 people were there till 2:30 at night. And it just doesn't seem to be that way anymore. You know, it almost seems like, you know, it's the kinder, gentler intern, graduate, whatever, you know, where they're like, well, you know, I've really got to go home and do this or that and stuff, you know, which, you know, honestly, you're not getting, you know, you are a, did you say indentured employee? Sorry.
They're non-exempt. You do have to follow those labor laws.
Exactly. The exempt employee. I'm sorry. Freudian slip there.
Yeah.
But, you know, you know, you're there, you know, you're only supposed to be working for the 40 hours a week and stuff, and you really should honestly try to manage projects so you don't have to work overtime. But there are those times when it happens that you have to work overtime. You have to, you know, be there, and, you know, sometimes it's kind of interesting. You know, I'll be working away, and it may only be like 7 o'clock at night. I pop my head, you know, up, and everybody's gone. Wait, I know we're all working on the same deadline. Where is everybody?
Yeah, it's a weird dynamic. I think a lot of it has to do with the way that the firm is, the culture of the firm is. You know, I kind of feel the same way, and it's not. I think everybody should be. Everybody does have a life, and everybody has different circumstances. There are people who can work a lot more than other people, depending on where they are in their life. You know, they could be just out of school, or they could be of the age where their kids are out of the house, and maybe they want to work more. And then there's other people who have kids, and they want to be home and be with their kids when they grow up. And everybody kind of has to set their own boundaries, but they also, you have to work within, you know, be a fit with the culture of your firm. So different firms have different expectations, just like different bosses have different expectations. But then when it really comes down to it, at the end, there is that deadline, right? And you've got to get it to whoever by whatever time, and somebody agreed to that, and so you have to stand by it. You know,
Cormac, the situation you described reminds me of when. I think when I first started, I worked in some smaller firms, you know, maybe 1 or 2, 3 people. And it was very much kind of all hands on deck to get something done. And that was kind of, I guess, just what I was used to. And so my first, you know, big job where I worked at a larger firm, and by large, I mean, I think it was maybe about 30 to 35 people at the time. So a fairly good-sized firm, and it was a very strange experience when, you know, not the entire firm was working on a project. You know, I mean, a firm that large, you've got, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 people on individual projects, and, you know, this firm had people working on, you know, commercial projects, and some people working on residential, and so it was a very diverse firm. And it was very strange when your project had a deadline and you were there late and working hard, and there were other people in the firm that you knew, and it was like, see you later. I'm going home. You know, I don't have a deadline, so I don't have to work late. And sometimes it was a strange feeling to have that you were having to work late and other people were going home, and to a certain extent they either couldn't help you if they wanted to for a variety of reasons. Sometimes, you know, it may be, hey, the project can't absorb another body, you know, right? Just from a budget standpoint, right? So there's that. But even if you know, I mean, so it's like, I don't know. It was just a very strange. I don't know if you guys have experienced that too. That first time when you're kind of in a bigger office and you're working late and nobody else is there.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
well, usually it's very
strange.
There's just a couple people there, and it is. It's weird. It's quiet. It's dead. Kind of.
I mean,
dead feeling.
I got used to it after a while.
It wasn't like that in studio, right? Everybody was there.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
exactly.
Yeah, everybody was there.
Everybody had the same deadline.
Right.
It was a lot different. But that, you're right. I think
Right.
there is something to be said about how different that is from studio. Because that's kind of how you're
Well, not only studio,
ingrained.
but firm to firm, right? I mean,
Right.
Cormac, when you were explaining, you had 7 people there. That's kind of a place where it's all hands on deck and everybody works, to pull in on a project if you need to. But when you have a firm of 30 or more, I mean, this firm grew to over 100 people while I was there. And, when you're that big, you don't even know what's going on because you got a satellite office and, who knows what's going on up there. So, so you can't be working all together to get something done. And it's just, it's a strange thing. So, I mean, people, if our listeners, if you're in school now, expect that. It's going to be a little bit different because in studio, like Evan just said, everybody's got the same deadline and you're all working together, maybe not helping each other out on a team, but when you get out into the workforce, it's a little different.
Yeah,
and
I think
and it can feel a little strange.
I think it has to do with the size of the firm more than anything, right? Because that really starts to look at how many projects could be going on at one time in the firm, and so yeah, if you're in a small firm, then everybody probably is working on the same 1 or 2 projects together.
Well,
Right.
I mean, there's the projects that you really just don't. I'll give you a good example. The project that I'm working on right now, it's got some crazy deadlines to it, and we've got a handful of people working on it, and they know the project. So, and I was asked by the senior project manager, hey, would you, do you need more people on this project? I'm like, to be quite honest with you, no. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, if I could have one person doing this, one person doing that, one person doing that, we could crank it all out. But I really don't want another person on there because I don't have the time to explain the project to somebody to really get them, up to speed on the project. So, there's times when you can't have, a large group effort on it because really it makes the project counterproductive.
Well, I'll tell you that I've seen more often than not that throwing bodies at a job just slows everything down.
Yes, it
because
does.
of exactly what you just said, right? It's that you have to get them up to speed, and that alone takes a long time to do. Let alone you don't know if they're going to have the same standards that the team has already developed. It seems like with all these Revit projects, every project that comes along, we have to discuss a new way to do it because it didn't quite work out how we thought the last time.
Right.
So there's new things being developed, or it's a different project type, and it requires thinking about it a different way and organizing the models in different ways. And so if you're coming off one project that does it one way and going on to a new project where things are different, but nobody takes the time to tell you that, you're going to make more problems.
I'm actually glad you brought up Revit. Had lunch with an old friend of mine that used to be a project manager at the firm that I'm at, and in fact, actually at the firm that I was at before I was at this firm. We were just two Bedouin project managers moving from place to place. And
That's in a song, isn't it?
Exactly. And she was an early adopter of Revit. She embraced it a little bit quicker than I did. The reason why is because she had a couple of projects that were, weren't really as busy at the time as some of the projects. So, whereas I was so comfortable and used to using AutoCAD every day that I could crank things out so quickly that I really didn't have time to be bothered with Revit. And
I think, yeah, you could insert any names of any two tools right there.
True,
it wouldn't matter.
Absolutely. But, now this is like 6 years later. And, I had lunch with her. She's been, working on some other things. And I happened to, talk about Revit. And she was like, I remember how much you hated Revit when it first came out, and I know you've been using Revit a lot, So now what is your impression of Revit? I'm like, I still hate it. And honestly, it's not because it's... I think there are some things that Revit can do that really make a project go along quicker. And there's a lot of things that help, especially project managers, helps them out because, if, and here's the big disclaimer, if people are tagging something and it's not a dummy tag, but a real tag.
I like how dummy tag is an accepted term.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
That, that it actually helps you with your coordination. But there are so many little things about just the graphics of that, the out-of-the-box Revit does or doesn't do, that just really just irks the crap out of me. That, I draw a wall and say it's a wing wall, that's on the end of a building and it's an exterior and it kind of extends out past, so it doesn't form a corner, but it kind of forms like a T. And I want brick to turn that corner. Well, you can't get a standard wall to do that, so you have to build two walls to, have it do what, a couple of offset lines in AutoCAD would do. So, there's just these...
You spend a lot of time resolving those things.
Right. But in the end, if it's done right and you're cutting a detail or a section through those, it should actually work out to your advantage because you're half the way... so once you start doing your enlarged details and everything, you're halfway there. Yeah. If you do it right,
Yeah.
And again, it's the disclaimer of if you do it right, because
Yep.
The one thing that I was, I guess in my early Revit days, let's take the Wayback Machine. But, in the earlier, in the early days of using it and transitioning to it, I didn't really know it, so I did a lot of the drafting side of it and let, the kids straight out of school and stuff do the modeling. Come to find out, that was probably the biggest mistake I'd ever made in my life, because I was leaving people who knew Revit but didn't know how to put buildings together to put the building together.
Yeah.
And, so that kind of changed. It forced me to actually learn Revit right. I'm still not, still ask a lot of questions and things like that, but I don't feel handicapped by my lack of knowledge in Revit. I'm feel like I can actually make Revit do exactly what I want it to do, which, is a good thing.
No sympathy.
No sympathy, man. Honestly, and to back to that, don't use your own personal ignorance as an excuse on why your documents could possibly suck or not suck.
I find
use
that
the tool the right way.
There is no excuse anymore for not knowing how to do something.
No,
because you can easily find out how.
Oh yeah, it's easy.
There's so many resources.
GetMethod.com is a great one. Not pitching anybody that is talking right now.
Well, I want to go back to, I want to get your guys' impressions. I've been through a couple of little downturns, one big one smaller one, and came out of school right when the economy really was not very good either, and it was kind of hard to find a job. But you talked about bonuses earlier.
Yeah.
And I wanted to revisit that a little bit because, when I first started, it was coming out of a bad recession in the early 90s, and there was the promise of the bonus, and it seemed very kind of like you never really sure. Kind of there was no clear cut. If you do X, you get Y.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It was at the time it was quarterly, so you got maybe a little bit of something each quarter, and things started going really well towards the middle and later 90s, and then the bonuses, for whatever reason, they went away and became like something else entirely. It was I don't know, it was very strange. And then at another firm I worked for the more senior level people, which I was at the time there, we had this very kind of rigid bonus structure that was introduced for us, and was like, okay, if you work 2,000 hours extra each year, so I mean 2,080 is kind of what the accepted amount of hours you work in a normal, year, right? So,
Just double that.
So double that. If you work double that, then you got, a certain level of bonus. But in addition to like working those many hours, you also had, in this case, I had a project team. So my project team had goals they had to meet. And some of it was, efficiency goals. They had to have so many billable hours. They had to, and just all these different rules and regulations about, okay, if you do all these, it's not just X, you get Y, but it was more like if you do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you get X.
Yeah.
And, and then it was like multiple tiers of that. So as you moved up the ladder, so if you worked like 2,500 extra hours in a year, or maybe it wasn't quite that high, but I mean, it was a crazy number. Then you moved up to another higher percentage.
That's called slavery.
I'm
I'm afraid.
But doesn't that sound disgusting?
Yeah. It
Well,
does.
I want to get your guys' opinion. Like, and I mean, that was a different experience. And then, but it just seemed like, the place my wife used to work, it was like the bonus was always. Before I get to that, the bonus back earlier always seemed like the carrot.
Yes.
It was like, okay, here we're gonna give you a raise, but it's only gonna be like 2% or 3% or something like that, and 1.5%. I don't know, whatever it was, right? But really, you've got this bonus, and the promise of this bonus that you may get, which is however many, whatever it was, and so really, we'll use like round numbers here. So it's like, okay, you make $50,000 a year, right? Well, really, there's this bonus out there of like $4,000 or $5,000, whatever it might have been, right? So it's like, okay, really, you make $55,000 a year, and so you really don't need to have this big raise because you'll make it up with the bonus. Have you guys ever been sold that bill of goods too? In reviews, or I brought up a couple of things, so I'm just curious what your.
I feel like the
reactions
bonus
are.
is always some kind of mystery, right? Nobody knows really how it's figured out, how it's divvied up amongst all the employees, how it works versus exempt versus non-exempt. I would imagine it's usually almost always driven on profit, right? And so if the company's not doing well, no one's going to get a bonus. If it's doing really
Right.
well, depending on the structure of the firm, it's going to get put out there. But it is always kind of this mystery that everybody is, nobody's clear on exactly how it works. And I even, during the last few years of this recession, it's not until that review time comes around to when people find out that there isn't going to be one, right?
Right.
Because they still want that mystery to be out there. They want everyone to think that there's still a possibility that you're going to get a bonus. Otherwise, magically, everybody, I don't know, just stops working, like because they don't actually care about the projects that they're working on. I mean, I honestly think they're going about it the wrong way. It's pretty crazy in this industry that we're in.
I agree. I mean, because they use the bonus as an incentive to,
Get you to work.
to get you to work harder, or to, I guess, stand out. Yeah, right. I mean, it is that's sort of the attempt, and in Neil's case, it's to work twice as much as,
as,
you would
as legally allowed.
as legally
right?
as allowed. Well, remember,
But
that.
you're exempt.
But you're exempt.
But you're
so-
exempt, so
you're exempt.
so you don't have to worry about the the legality of it all. But but I think using that as the carrot, as you were saying, that doesn't seem to be a motivator. Just,
Well, it isn't because
It
it's a year
was.
away.
Well, but it was a big motivator in the one case where, Evan,
But-
it was actually spelled out. If you do all these things, you hit all these goals, you'll make X.
Yeah, but then
and
then
that was
you
very
X has
well
got-
spelled out.
X better be really really good.
Yeah, because if
Well-
it's what you said it was, then I think a lot of people might just say, well, then that's not worth it, so I'm just not even going to try.
Right. I think it
Whereas
was-
most firms, it's
yeah.
a mystery, and you don't know
Right.
if what you're doing is good or not.
But I mean, what you're sacrificing, though. I mean, and here is really
Yes.
where I was getting to the point is you're sacrificing your lifestyle
your family.
You're sacrificing
Everything.
a lot of things, just a potential better life,
For more money.
And in this particular case of, if we're just using just the round figure example you were using, not much money. So
Right.
So,
Well.
so let's just do the math on that real quick. So you're saying that for 40 hours a week, for the 52 weeks a year, you're going to make $50,000. If you work double that, we're going to give you another $5,000.
Well, yeah,
It was.
those weren't realistic numbers,
right. But I mean, but see, that's actually. You may say it's not realistic numbers, but you've got people out there who are working 50, 60, 70 hours a week constantly,
Right.
all the time, for basically that small little carrot. And it may not even be that big. If you're
Right.
Say you're a recent graduate or something, or you're making or you're like in the 2, 3, 4 year range, and you're making between 45 and 50 a year.
Right.
And, you may get like $1,500 for working an extra 30% more.
Right. And
I can give you.
That's very true. Actually,
I can give you a couple of examples of quote unquote bonuses that I've got. There was one competition where I was called in the last minute to take the lead design on a project, and I worked for 4 days straight on it. That's when the deadline was. It was 4 days later, and I worked 4 days straight. And I came out of that after the submission, and there were several of us. It wasn't just me. There was like a team of 4 people. We got a $25 Target gift card.
Awesome. Awesome.
Crazy, right?
That it's, I mean...
Are you serious?
And a handshake. Yeah. And that was the leader's idea of a bonus for that. And this was a person who was never there.
I'll do you one. Well, I don't...
Do it. Do it, because then I got another one.
Okay. So, worked for a firm that was about 30 people. And, I was an intern, so I didn't really expect much of anything. But I'd been there for 7 months. And, I heard throughout the year, oh, yeah, we usually get, pretty decent, Christmas bonuses, so, at the Christmas party, they usually, like, hand you a check and all this other stuff. So, they're handing out all these envelopes and stuff like that, and everybody's, I guess it's in poor taste to open up the envelope while you're, still at the party and stuff. So, we're all, like, done, and we're walking out to our cars and stuff, and a group of us rode together, so like we open it all up, and everybody, now this is an intern all the way to a senior project manager, we all open it up, we all got the exact same thing, and it was a $50 gift card or gift receipt, whatever the hell it was, to Honey Baked Ham.
And I'm a vegetarian.
The funny thing is that the senior project architect, he's like, $50 won't even buy you half of a Honey Baked Ham.
Yeah.
I mean, you should have seen the look on his face. I mean, he was so pissed. I mean, because he honestly was. I mean, again, now I wasn't really expecting anything because I was an intern.
Right.
But the higher up you are, you really do have expectations.
You do, especially when you're
when
killing
it is
yourself.
thrown out there, and it's thrown out there. Yes, there's bonus potential based on your performance, right? When really it should be based on the outcomes that happen. Was the project profitable? Did you do well on the project? Is the client thrilled?
Honestly,
Like,
that right there, your example is what should be the carrot. Is and in fact, actually, I've talked with a lot of construction managers, and that's how they structure their bonuses. It's not.
What about, is your team have very high morale? There's a lot of ways to measure success within a company, and it's not. I don't know. It's not. It doesn't seem to be the real reasons that people do this for.
I mean, you could always go back to, the you know what your incentive is? You got a job.
Yeah, you can.
You know,
And you said you didn't
that's
expect
worked
it.
really well the last four or 5
unfortunately,
years,
you're right, because there's people who
Because you can't count on that. That's right.
Exactly, and you haven't raise bonus. What are those?
Yeah.
I've got a job though, and I can be happy about that kind of thing, and but don't use it as an opportunity to abuse your employees.
Right. Right. Yeah. Just let me tell you my one last really sad story
Yes.
here. I got a $50 bonus for whatever, and when I got my paycheck was lower
right?
than what it usually was, because they had added it on there. It's because they had to tax it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It bumped me up into the next tax bracket, this $50 bonus, and I had to pay more in taxes. And I go to accounting, I say, what crack team is working on this here? And they actually told me, well, maybe you'll get it back at the end of the year in taxes,
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that sounds wonderful.
Okay, I'll do that. Actually, what's sick about bonuses and taxing and all that other stuff is that bonuses are taxed higher than your normal, income. And so, say you get like a $1,500 bonus, and it gets taxed, and you actually only get like say $900 or something, because it's like taxed at 30% or something. 35%.
It's more than that.
Yeah, it's
more. Yeah,
it's
more than that.
Some
It's
craziness, but it's just it's just like is it really worth it? Especially if it does bump you up into the next tax bracket. So when you are filling out your taxes and you're like, well, if you would have just made $50 less, you would have got money back, but now you owe $400.
Yeah, right.
Wait, I owe $400 on a $50 bonus. Thanks.
Hey, that's the bonus. Congratulations.
No sympathy.
No sympathy. I guess that the moral of this story is, number one, you can't count on bonuses. But number two, to the people who are starting architecture practices, you get to decide how this works.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it the way that we're describing, which seems just crazy, right? But it's probably because that's the way they've always done it. And I feel like we talked a little bit about this last episode with Mark LePage, and it was like you get to decide how your firm is going to do things. And, I think this even goes back to one of our earliest episodes where we talked about Andrew Maynard's article, where he said, he kept a copy of the employee manual on his desk so that when someone said, I'm going to need you to come in on Saturday, he said, okay, well, let's look up what the policy on that is.
Yeah.
And he didn't stand for any of the BS when it came to that kind of stuff. And he's a very successful architect now because of it. He is running his own firm on his own terms, which seem to be very well regarded in the industry as cutting edge, even though they're just basic common sense, I think, more than anything. So I want to implore people to, you have more power than you think you do. You can go to your HR department and talk to them about this. You can define and you can decide and design what your practice is going to be like and how you're going to reward your employees.
Yeah, and even if you work in a larger firm, it's really up to you. There is a lot of pressure, though, I will say, and especially as a young architect,
yeah, definitely.
Working in a firm, it's you want to impress because you want to get the choice jobs. I mean, that's what it was when I worked for this firm. It was 30 or 40 people at the time, and you wanted to be the go-to person that the senior management is looking for, because those are the people that tend to get promoted. And unfortunately, that's it. In larger firms, that's what happens.
Yeah.
And you do have a choice, though. I mean, and as you said with Andrew Maynard, he chose not to do that, and he left that environment. But for those that may not have that choice or may not feel they're ready to make that choice, you have to make do. But you have to make your own personal decision on whether or not you're going to come in, you're going to work that weekend, or you're going to work that night, or whatever it is. I know when I was first out of school and working in those first 8 or 10 years, I wasn't married. I didn't have a family. And so it was much easier for me to make that choice of, I'm going to work like crazy and try and work my way up. And, to a certain extent, it was successful. I should say I was successful at that. I did rise at the firm, and if I had stayed there, I'd probably be in a better financial position than I am now. But I didn't, and that's the way things are. But but I did make a decision, though, at other firms and other points in time. The firm that I was describing earlier that did kind of go a different route and said, okay, well, now we're going to be very structured about who gets bonuses and how they're done. There was some certainty in how that worked. The hours were a little crazy. I don't think it was 2,000. I think it was more like, honestly, I think it was closer to 1,000 hours extra a year. But I mean, it was, that's like working an extra 4 months out of the year.
Exactly.
So you're going to work 16 months in 12. And, the bonuses were fairly sizable. They were a certain percentage of your salary. And, so I mean, you were almost getting those 4 extra months in salary for that year. It wasn't quite that big, but it was close. And so, there definitely was that reward at the end. But when I was there, I did, and this is probably what a lot of us encounter, I think, as we progress through our careers, is I had just gotten married, and, I missed an entire weekend trip that we were supposed to take because, I had to step up. I had to be the person to get this done. And so it's like, boom, I had to blow off this whole trip. And, but then I got married, and I said, this is crazy. I never see my wife. I'm never home. I can't do this. And I left.
Yeah.
I said, I just said that was my choice at that time. I said, I am not going to make this sacrifice to earn this extra amount to do this. And the other project managers, there was like 4 of us at this firm, 4 project managers, and 4 or 5 of us. And they were all crazy busy. They were doing it. And, and I don't know Cormac, you've said, I know in the past on this show about how you'll maybe go home and have dinner, put the kids to bed, and then you head back to the office. I mean, if you live close enough, you can do that. And the other 4 project managers that I worked with at this firm, they all lived within a 5-minute radius of the office. And I didn't. I lived like 45 minutes away. I was the only one. And, that's what they did. That's how they were hitting all these hours, is they would go home for a few hours, come back at 8, 9 o'clock at night and work till midnight or 1, and then just do that every single day. So you're racking up 4 to 6 hours extra every day. And, for me, the challenge for me was I couldn't do that. It was like I had a 45-minute drive home or a 45-minute drive back. So it's like, I'm not going to spend an hour and a half doing that thing. So I would end up getting there at 7 in the morning, and I'd stay till 8 at night, to try and get in those 8 or 12 or 13 hours. And it's like, after a while, I just physically couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I said, forget it. I don't care what that bonus is anymore. That's when the money just doesn't matter. And we're not talking lawyer money, right? We're not talking $250,000 a year or $200,000 a year. So it's just like, I'm not doing it. And I changed the situation.
Yeah, I think that's important to say, is that you do have some amount of control over your boundaries, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that you have to reevaluate those all the time based on your life situation. So I have found I think it's consistent that whoever you work for pretty much expects you to be like them. If they don't understand your situation, you need to have that conversation. So if they're in a completely different place in life than you, they have to understand where you are so that they can understand what your boundaries are. But there's other people in the firm that probably have no clue about that, and they probably wonder why they never see you, you know? And that at that time, it's your supervisor's responsibility to go to them and say, look, here's why it's like this, you know, and we've had that conversation, and this is how it works, and this is what I've agreed to. But a lot of times I think people don't say anything, and they just either hope no one notices, or they're afraid to say it, or whatever, and then you get taken advantage of, or you get let go because there's a misunderstanding.
You know, the something else that came to mind is that in school it's similar. Now, we're not talking bonuses, we're not talking money, we're not talking getting ahead of the next student in your studio, but I would say, you know, you're still in charge of what you do even in studio, and you can make those choices like, okay, you know, I'm not going to work tonight, I'm going to go out and have some fun, because, you know, you're in college. Do some growing up, have some fun, get your work done, you know, but don't kill yourself in school either. You got the rest of your life to do that. And you'll actually get paid for it, or at least some of it. Yeah. Right. And, you know, I mean, so I would say for those that are listening to us that are in studio or in school now, have some fun in school, because it's very different. If you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you know, it's not all roses. It's not all bad either once you're out of school, because it's nice getting a paycheck for actually working. You know, it would have been nice to get a paycheck when I was in school too, but because it seemed like I worked harder in school than I did out of school.
And you had to pay for that abuse.
And you had to pay for that abuse, yeah.
And you probably still are.
Yeah. Well, in a way, if you're working,
I'm not. I'm done.
But if you're working, you know, like half a year more, or almost a full year more, just to get that carrot at the end of the, you know, string, you are paying for the, you know,
yeah.
You may be
in different ways.
Exactly.
That's right.
You know,
and your health is probably suffering because of that as well.
You know, and as Neil and Evan, as you were both describing, you know, these situations and stuff, you know, I could just think is, you know, we've done this to ourselves. We've set up this kind of almost abusive relationship with our profession that, you know,
and it's accepted.
And right? It's accepted. I mean, it's almost expected, not even just accepted, but expected that, you know, you've got all these guys, well, you know, I mean, when I was an intern, you know, I was here, you know, 80 hours, 90 hours a week, you know, and I don't understand why you don't stay longer and stuff. And so, you know, then they say, oh, you know, well, to be successful, I've got to stay longer. And, you know, we just continuously perpetuate this problem with more and more, more and more abusive kind of, you know, ways that we stay later, and, you know, I'm going to get this job done. You know, the job, you know, we've talked about this on numerous occasions, where if we schedule the project out properly, when we schedule a project out, we typically do it based on a 40-hour work week. If you can't get it done within the 40-hour work week, then really what the problem is that it wasn't scheduled out properly in the first place. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's true, but then Cormac, you also said, you know, earlier tonight that sometimes your deadlines change, or
right,
you know, or the deadline doesn't move and the scope changes, and that's out of your control.
Well, you know,
then what do you do?
Yes and no.
Well,
you do have to say something,
and that was where I was going, Evan. Is that, you know,
okay,
you know, if things change, then you've got to speak up and let it know, you know, let it be known. If, say, you know, okay, we're going to, you know, assign this project to Neil, and, you know, we've done it so that Neil will be 100% billable to this project for a year, but Neil's also got 2 other projects that he's 100% billable for those projects as well. You know, so now you've basically tasked Neil to do 3 years worth of work in 1 year. So you got to figure out, it's like, okay, this won't work, so we've got to staff it right. And I'm not going to get on the soapbox of staffing, proper staffing and all that other stuff, because that's a whole rant in itself.
It's complicated.
But I mean, very complicated. But I mean, if you're just like, okay, now I have 3 years worth of work that I've got to get done in 1 year. If you don't step up and say something about it, then they're just going to say, okay, Neil can handle this. Maybe 6 months into it, we give Neil another project, because now all he's got 6 years or 6 months of a project done. He can handle another project, kind of thing. And, we just let that, go on and on and on and on and on. And if that's the incentive, is just that they rely on you, which, tends to be the case in a lot of, it's just, you want to make yourself so indispensable that you'll take all of this responsibility on, and you'll push yourself to do all of this work and everything. That's really it. That's what your reward is, regardless of what they're paying you. It's just that they're just going to work you more. That's the reward, is they're going to work you more. And it's not going to be a good lifestyle. It's going to be just this, rough working condition, because you're just, you're abusing yourself. I mean, and then, it just, so it's that kind of, that cyclical thing is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So,
no sympathy.
Yeah.
No sympathy.
No, it's really, in this particular case, we can all sympathize because we've all done it. The problem is that, as you were talking about, Andrew Maynard, from, what was that? It had to have been like our first show, or first or second show. He did it right. He's gearing it towards. We all talk about, architecture is not just our profession, but it's our life. It's part of us. It's part of what we do and who we are. And so that's fine. But how does your life and your profession, enrich your actual life? Your day.
Right.
And if you can't, you're working yourself to death, that's what your life is going to be, is just one constant work, and so you have to find that happy balance. And
yeah, I agree. Well said.
So anyway, no sympathy.
No sympathy.
I guess what we're trying to say is this isn't an easy profession.
Well, to be quite honest with you, it could be, if we find that balance, because if you're educated enough and you're experienced enough and you can manage your time and everything else properly, architecture's not hard. It's really not that hard.
You can make a decent living doing it.
It's complicated. There's a lot of parts and pieces that you've got to know, or at least understand how they all go together, and make sure that the right people are doing the right things. But it's really not that hard. And now this is, coming from three people who've been in the profession for, 13, 14, 15, in Neil's case, 100 years. And, it's... Sorry, man.
He didn't laugh.
He did. He's yelling at some people to get off his lawn, but...
Do I have to remind you that there's a mute button on my mic?
Anyway, but anyway, it's... see, you got me off track here.
I didn't. I was silent. I didn't say anything. I was going to let you go with it.
I was just, getting to the point of it. It's just like, it's not that hard for us. It could be very difficult and complicated for, the people who are just coming out of school. And it's people like us who need to show them, the right way to do things. And if we're giving them the example of, we're going to bust our ass and work, 60 hours a week, 70, 80 hours a week and stuff like that, we are continue.
You're setting that example.
We're setting that example to continue to perpetuate this problem that we have in this profession.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So we need to make the change.
So
Right.
to enact the change,
So Cormac,
we need to be the change.
Stop working all these hours.
Remember,
That's how we started the show.
Remember.
Cormac, you're your own worst enemy. I don't want to hear no.
I completely agree with you, and that's why we will have in an upcoming episode staffing a project properly.
Oh, that sounds like a good teaser for the next episode.
Exactly.
Well, then I guess with that, let's wrap this one up, guys.
Sounds good.
All right. If you have questions or comments, visit our website at archispeakpodcast.com, where you'll find links to our individual Twitter accounts and the Archispeak Podcast Facebook page, so you too can join in on the conversation. If you have an inspiring tale to share, call the Archispeak Podcast at 415-484-8496, and we'll share it on the show. And if you haven't done so already, please leave us a review on iTunes. With that, stay subscribed, and thanks for listening.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.
I used to shy away from the stampede. I'd hibernate, hunker down in my heart at all. To get good at the game, I had to grease up my riot gear, and that craving came when you crossed along, yeah, when you came along. Jim and Dog dared me, turn the sprinklers on. Barefoot in the driveway, baby. Platform dancing, form like a crazy man. Someone who proudly tumbled, diving face first, fat with chances, braving birthday suited. Oh, baby girl, Jim and Dog dare me, turn the sprinklers on. Barefoot in the driveway, baby. I get naked. What do I got for my birthday suit? My little piece of creation. I'm gonna shake them on, I gave on, I gave on, I gave on to say thank you. What will I have what I want to do? I'm a perfect relation. I'm gonna shake, I got love for you, love for you, love for you, love for you. I got love for you. I got love for you. I got love for you. I used to shy away from the limelight. I tucked my face up tight in my sleeping bag to build a better base. I had to fly my war paint right. I'm a better place since you made me upright. Love is never fight. Triple Dog dare me, turn the sprinklers on. Barefoot in the driveway, baby. Platform dancing, warm like crazy. Found someone who proudly tumbled, diving face first, fat with chances, braving birthday suited. Oh, baby girl, Triple Dog dare me, turn the sprinklers on. Barefoot in the driveway, baby. I get naked. What have I got for my birthday suit? My little piece of creation.